So let's think about this. Water is very expensive to ship to space. Very expensive. It's $10,000 per pound. So roughly to send one small bottle of water, you're looking at probably, $8,000. So how do astronauts get their water? Well, as you saw in the video that was filmed by astronaut Chris Hadfield, he talks about that water system as well. So this is called a water reclamation system, and basically it means to reclaim the water. So they get water from all different sources, just as he mentioned. They get it from their perspiration, they get it from condensation that builds up, so that goes all the way back to what we did the very first day. And then they get sources from other things such as the toilet. So what we need to think about, and I know that sounded really gross, but that's really, it's liquid, so it has to all be reclaimed and filtered and turned into water that the astronauts can use. This will be the same thing that we have to think about when we design our moon outpost. So let's go ahead and talk about the reclamation systems that are currently in place with NASA. Okay, as you see on the screen, this is coming from a book that is called 100 Things to Know About Space. So let's just look at the left side of the screen right now. And it says astronauts drink the same water again and again, which means, oh my goodness gracious. So nothing is wasted. That's the big part to take away from all this. It says sending water supplies into orbit is wildly expensive, and they are not joking. To conserve as much water as possible, the astronauts on the International Space Station use a recycling system that can reclaim 93% of the water on board, which is a lot. So if you follow that diagram, and I'm pointing it out on the screen, if you follow that diagram as it goes around, water is constantly reclaimed. Now, to design a system like that, we have to use the engineering design process, which is kind of like what you're going to be doing in just a few minutes. So your system is going to take the water that I have collected, and actually your teacher has made a sample of it. You're going to take that water and you're going to clean it. You may have to filter it multiple times, just like they do on the space station. And what is too many times? Believe it or not, it can be filtered many times. You might want to get it down to a point where it can be drinkable, but you will not drink this water in class. Let's just have that right now. When you get to see the water sample in just a few minutes after we get through this video, there's another one I've created for you, but I want you to do a safe sniff of the water. So as the water comes close, that's a safe sniff, because we don't ever want to damage the mucous membranes, because they connect to everything up here, ear, nose, and throat, and you never want to damage them. You're too young for something like that to happen. So we call it a safe sniff, and that's called wafting. So as it wafts through the air, we sniff it. So don't put your nose right up against it, because that's not good for you. So using the engineering design process, you're going to go ahead and design a water filtration system, just kind of like the one they have on the space station. You're going to test it, and we're going to get to all that in just a second. But that's the ultimate goal, is that water, to get it to the point where it can be drinkable, or as they say, potable. So let's go ahead and look at what NASA currently has in place. This is their system. It's really complicated, as you can see, but not so much. It looks complicated on there, but believe it or not, it's going to be really similar to what you're doing today. So just to let you know, you could be NASA engineers and not even know it. So this is the fancy way of looking at how the water comes in, how they clean it, how they clean the air, how they do everything. This is all their engineering system up there for environmental situations. So that's what that is all about, that fancy diagram, and you're going to actually do a very simple version of this today, which I hope you have a lot of fun with. So let's go ahead and look at what we have to take care of. The pH scale is going to be really important today. You're going to be using pH test strips. Before you test your water, the water sample that's been provided for you, you want to test the sample. You want to test the pH level of that water. So when you test it, it's probably going to be somewhere down around a 3 or a 4 if I have a guess. But if you look at the pH test, the pH scale, 7 is where you would want to have your drinking water. That's normally what regular average drinking water comes out to, is a 7 on the pH scale. So what you want to try to do is you're going to filter it many times to try to get that from wherever it starts at, whether it be on one side or the other, to try to get it back to the middle, which is where we want it. And that's what would be considered neutral. As you can see on the far left, that's considered acidic, and on the far right, it's considered alkaline. So just to let you know what you're going to be using. Now, let's talk about the sheet that you will be using to calculate and track all of your data. So if you look at the screen right now, and I'm going to switch my head just for a second so I can see that screen as well, you notice that I have a place for your team members. You're a crew, so you got to write down your team members. Before you start, take a sample of the pH. What is the pH level currently? And then, what does it look like? Give me a color. Don't always use the same colors because it may not always be the same. It can be a pale, it can be a dark, whatever you all agree upon, that's what you're going to call it. And then, of course, cloudiness. Can you see through that liquid? If it's cloudy, that means you also probably want to clean that up, because if you think about regular drinking water, you can see through it if it's good to drink. Then, is there any amount of debris floating in the water? Debris would be things that could have been captured from the water reclamation system. So thinking about what could be in the air, that's the particles that you're looking for. And then, of course, the volume. We want to start off with no more than 250 milliliters, and that's our starting point. So you're starting off with 250 milliliters of water. And that's the thing to remember, because as you filter it, you could lose some water. So we have to be careful about the materials that we select, because as we select them, some of them might absorb water. So let me just give you an example. If I were to make pasta, I can start out with a certain amount of water, and my spaghetti might be very brittle because it's dry. But when I cook it and I get that pasta, what happens to that water? The pasta is absorbing that water. So when I start, the pot is at a certain level, but then as I cook my spaghetti, at the end, my water will not be the same level. So that's what I'm talking about. So then after you make your first filter sample, you need to go back through and decide, okay, that worked. We got the pH to start shifting and start moving. Again, after you pass the water through the filter the first time, test the pH. Has it shifted? If it has not shifted, maybe you need to think about different materials. If it has shifted, maybe it just needs to be refiltered, and you'll run that water back through again. So every time you're doing this, you're testing the pH level after you run it through the filter, but you're also looking at how much volume of water you've lost. So if you look down at the very bottom, after we've passed through at least 3 times, you need to do that amount of volume that you've lost overall, because remember, we started off with 250. At the end, if I end up with 200, I have lost, let's see, 250 minus 200, I have lost 50 milliliters of water. So what if you lose too much water? Well, then you're going to have to really think, how am I going to reclaim all this water I need for the astronauts? So these are kind of things to think about. These are the things that the engineers have thought about as well. So carefully go through with your team members and decide, what do we already know about these materials we're using? What can clean the water to make it so we can see through it, to cut out the cloudiness? What can capture the debris that's in the water, because we don't want to drink that? And then what's going to make sure that I don't lose volume? So all of these things will be very important. But again, if you need to, go back and have the teacher replay Mr. Hadfield's video that he recorded from space. That might give you some more clues and give you something else to think about. It's going to take a while today for this experiment. Please take your time. I want you to think like scientists and engineers today, and I want you to think, oh wow, we need to do this, because as we design our outposts, we're responsible for making sure the astronauts have water. So that's why this is so important. And believe it or not, I've done this activity with my students, and I've also done this activity when I've gone camping. And it's really interesting to see what materials I have available and what you can use as a filter. So always be thinking, could I really do this in real life? Yes, you can. You can do this in the real world. I would not recommend using the mixture that we're using today, but you can always clean water. Water can always be cleaned. If it's got debris, create a filter and clean it out. Get it back to being clear. If it tastes funny, that might be a pH problem. The pH, believe it or not, can affect the taste of the water. So all of these things are important, and water treatment plants all around the country, in China, in the United States, this is kind of what they do to make sure that we have water that is safe to drink and clean to drink. So consider all this as you put on your engineer hats and you think about things. I wish you luck with this activity, and the next video is going to show you how you're going to go about doing this with me back in my kitchen, doing a demo for you so you can create your water reclamation system or your filtration device. I wish you luck on this. Remember, we want to end up with as much water as possible, but it's got to be a pH as close to 7 as possible. The teacher can go back up and put the pH chart back up on the board so you can see it. Don't give up on this. Remember, it took engineers a long time to design this. But good luck, and I'll check back in with you later.